income that's more than 50% of your work income, and you have monthly non-discretionary bills such as a mortgage, a car payment, more than 25% of your monthly income, you can also apply. And so there's two ways. One is you can be at 80% of income of Monterey County. And I apologize, the sheet still shows 60%, but it's 80%.
Eric, can you hear me? Can I jump in with a question on that?
Of course.
25% of your monthly income, if I recently lost my job and my income has dropped, how does that, at what point do you count the 25% against your income? Is it before the COVID or is it today?
Right. Well, this is actually a two-part. It is you can qualify either way. But notice that number 3, it says that you must have economic damage due to COVID where you've lost at least 50% of your income.
Okay, so if in March I lost my job and in April I'm making a lot less, I'm making less, I'm owing more than 25% of my April income, is that what you count? Or is it
Right.
last year's annual income or something like that?
Well, if your income to start with was 80% of the median of Monterey County, you qualify automatically. Or if I've had my income reduced by 50% and I have fixed debts that I have to pay, mortgages, car payments, something like that, that are more than 25% of my monthly income, then I'd qualify also.
Okay,
so
thank you. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
But I think the important point is that these loans, you have to show that you've lost 50% of your income due to the COVID event. So and so if you're unemployed, that's a pretty good signal that that's happened. On the business side, oops, I'll go back. On the business side, you have to have a business license, and that way we know that you're in Marina. You can only have 10 or fewer employees, and so it's not for larger business, but for smaller businesses. There's one exception for restaurants. You can have up to 20 employees because lots of times restaurants have part-time employees. The household income here is strictly, it must be 90% or less than the Monterey County median. So there's only one way on the income side here. And you're asked to have applied for the SBA Economic Injury Damage Loan or the Payroll Protection Program loan. And we know that sometimes that window gets closed. And so applying may be nothing more than striving to have an appointment with such as the SBDC, which is the Small Business Loan organization that helps people apply. And if they say you can't apply now because the window's closed, then you've at least tried to do that. But the council wanted to see people trying to apply for these other loans. So let's just go through a median income calculation for a business. Let's say my business income was $20,000, and businesses have a choice sometimes to declare depreciation or not. If you declare depreciation, that's added back into your calculation of what your household income is. And let's say that I decide in this business I'm going to give myself a salary. I don't have to do that. Some businesses don't give themselves any salary and they just take the income out of it. But in this case, let's say this is a family of 3. You can see that their total would be $60,000. You come up here to 90% of income, and that 60% is below what the household size for 3 for 90% of Monterey County average. And so they'd qualify for the loan.
Can I jump in, Eric? It looks like it might total 55,000, but maybe I'm missing something.
You're actually right. I was trying to add 5 more thousand. I better fix that.
But either way, you'd be under the $60,000 $30.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Now, Eric, I had one business call me and they say, you know, we're really struggling here in Marina. We've been here for X years. And I'm wondering if I'm going to have to, you know, go bankrupt with my business. but I do have other household family members that have jobs, and so we're not under the poverty level, but our household income between us, my husband and my children, that's separate from that than what we can put into our business. So we can't apply for this because if you add up the people in our household, we earn more than this, but we're super struggling and we're a super small business. What's the best response I could give that person?
Well, Mayor, when this was put together, we did mention that to council, and at the time, council decided to keep these restrictions. We are trying to have at least the first round of funding and come back and give council some feedback about where we're at. So I think the thing to do is to express that concern, and when it's brought back to council on May 5th, just as an interim report, there can be discussions about whether or not we should change any of these restrictions.
Great. And I told her, please apply anyway so that we know your situation. And if the criteria are changed, then you've already got your application in and we could probably process it. But please apply anyway. I would tell people if it's not too much of their time and effort.
You know, Mr. Mayor, is Matt Mogensen, if I could also add something I would also maybe, counsel this business on is that while the SBA loans have been slower and there's been issues with that, we've also got a couple more local options. And one is through the Cal Coastal Development Corporation, and they offer up to $25,000. And then there's the Monterey County microloan. And those are both of them, if the business contacted the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, they could help them to apply for those loans as well. And those, I do not believe, have the same income qualifications.
So Matt, I know that we're sort of interrupting Eric's presentation, but let's go on a little bit of a sidetrack here. Can you tell everyone about the assistance that recently started from the city to all the business people and the residents? If they have questions about this, or if they have questions about the other things that you mentioned, is there guidance and handholding available to businesses who see this as a real struggle to do any of those options that you're talking about?
Certainly for the business community, Monica Kim has been brought on as a temporary person to help us to do outreach, and she's already contacted most of our businesses that are of a certain level of tax receipts. She's working through the rest of them. But as she contacts them, she's making them aware of all these different programs as well.
And how about Pam? Is she available? Another person for more detailed and more expertise required questions about accounting, et cetera?
Yeah, so businesses that are interested in applying for loans, not the city loan necessarily, but for the SBA loans and for the other ones I described, Pam can help them make sure their applications are as in good a condition as possible before they submit them, so that they have the best chance of being funded and being funded quickest.
So as of about a week ago, we added 2 people whose only job is to help those who are having trouble navigating all of this process.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's great news. I just wanted to get it out there, even though we were interrupting, in case people are curious or didn't know anything about that. But thanks for your patience, Eric.
Sure, no, that was very appropriate, Mayor. This last page just tells you where to go if you want to pursue these or find more information. On the city's web page, the front one, you go to cityofmarina.org. You can see at the very top of the page 2 buttons. One says help for businesses, one says help for residents, and then it has the loan documents and more information about applying. And so that's where I've referred people if they want to know about it. If you want to send us an email, we'll ask more. If you want to call us directly, we can talk it through. But that's where we're at, Mayor, and that's what the city has done so far.
Well, thanks to you and Matt and Councilmember O'Connell for all you've done as a team, and to the whole city council and our city manager for supporting all of this, and the public for their support. And Eric, can you turn me back into the host? We can still talk, but then.
That's how you feel about me, Mayor. I will do it.
I just need to do some things that right now I couldn't do.
Sorry.
No, this is fine. I just don't know how to. I've never had the host change on me like this. So I'm not sure how to do it, but I think it's going to be on your end, Eric.
It is. You are now the host, Mayor.
All right. So let's turn it over to the public on what we've heard about business help and residents help to the financial assistance to basically everybody in town. Does anybody have any questions who's listening in on this town hall? And if you can raise your hand, either using the button next to your name, or if you wave your hand, I'll try to keep an eye out for it. And I'm going to look at the chat box. I think we have a couple of chats. But go ahead and raise your hand in some fashion. Okay, Doug, go ahead.
I put my hand back down too slowly. It's only partly related, but have you guys got a sense of what the decline in sales tax is going to be and how that's going to impact the budget? I noticed these loans are from general fund.
Yeah, and it's great you brought that up, because I think we may be the only or one of the few cities that have actually used our general fund money to loan out to businesses and residents. Other cities have special funds that aren't the same money that pays their fire and parks and police and street maintenance. But for us, it's our most dear dollars. Our general fund is what we pay the bills with, our utility bills, etc. And so it's a very sensitive topic that we use that money judiciously, but we're doing it. And we're expected to lose about $2 million between the start of COVID problems and June of this year, and another $8 million next year. So in 15 months, we're planning on potentially losing $10 million approximately. That's a lot of money. Our annual budget is around 21 million, and we have $11 million in both combined in reserves and unassigned dollars that didn't have a home, but we had a lot of plans for them, but nothing official. So it's going to wipe out most of what we have in our emergency reserves and our unobligated funds, unless we do something else, like we get money from the state or the feds to try to make us whole, or we cut expenses somewhere. But that's the thumbnail answer, and I'll turn it over to Eric Frost and see if he can add some details to that. And Eric, if you
Mayor, I think you summarized it very well. We're hoping that next year we don't lose the full 8 million. That 8 million is on the assumption that nothing changes for a full year. We're hoping that sometime next year it'll be opening up. But even if you think it's going to open up, I don't think we'll escape into next year without having some decline. So I think it's probably somewhere between what the mayor said, maybe on the better side, or the best case scenario, we lose only 4 million. But it is substantial that we lose next year because of this pandemic.
And if you look at that 11 million, and just hypothetically, if we gave $1 million, we're not talking about that, but if we did give $1 million to businesses and residents via loans, that would be about 8% of what we have set aside. And so far we've set aside 200 grand. And so that would be about 2% of 11 million, something in that ballpark. So the question is, what percent of our unobligated funds, including our reserves, would be intelligent to give back to our residents and businesses in this crisis? So far, I think we're about at 2%, and I think we can probably afford that. And if we go higher than that, we'll have to be asking the same questions. Okay, let's see. Does anyone else have any questions?
That's very courageous. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, well, it was courageous for you to be paying us taxes all this time. So it's really the business money, is this business taxes and residential property taxes that created that 11 million for the most part. So it's like it came from the people, and now the people are hurting. So what can we do? Anyone else with questions about the residential? Fareed or Fred, I see that you're on here. Did you have any questions, and how are you doing? Did you apply for this money, Fareed, and did you have any trouble, or was it easy to do if you tried it? Go ahead, Fred.
I I had Nancy, she fill up the application for me, but I'm wondering who should I send it to? I went to the city hall, and all the doors is closed, and you can contact nobody.
Well,
So
Fred, they must have saw you coming and closed the doors, Fred. I'm surprised they would do that.
not much I am bad luck, huh?
Yeah. No, let's have Eric or Matt answer that because they're ready to receive your applications. We just have to make sure everyone's on board with how to do that. Go ahead, Fred or Matt. I'm sorry, yeah, Eric or Matt, sorry.
If you want to file it in person, on the employee entrance, there's a mail slot. So there's the main city hall entrance, which is locked. But if you go to the west, there is a mail slot there. You can deliver it that way.
Okay, so you can deliver it in person, Fred, if you find the right mail slot. I'm trying to close down any hecklers. This is the kind of thing that is happening around the country, but we'll work through it. But overall, I think these are very helpful meetings, and we'll get better. Okay. So any other questions on the business loans? And Fareed, I'm really happy that people like you can be applying because it's the small businesses in Marina that are really important for us to keep, including yours and everyone else's. But thank you, Fareed, for being willing to speak up and let us know if you're having any trouble. I hope that works out. Always feel free to contact me or anybody at City Hall to help you out. And now you know there's 2 people at City Hall, Fred, that can also help you out with getting county loans or federal loans. Just go ahead. Okay, I'm working on it. So anyway, Fareed, make sure that you know everything you want to know about other loans, not just the city loans, because we have 2 people at City Hall plus others, but 2 specifically to help you that are waiting for you to reach out and tell them what they can do to help you understand all of the options that are there and how to exactly to make progress with any one of those options that fits your circumstances. So please stay in touch with City Hall because they are definitely there and able to put you in touch with the right process to get what you need. Okay, so we're going to move on to our chief of police and city manager as necessary. And Tina Nieto, who's our chief of police.
Hey, Bruce, some name Mark, I would disconnect them. It's probably the kids again.
Okay.
Because they're not going to be coming on the meeting this late unless they're connecting to audio.
I think the best method is to mute everybody except for the person you want to talk because they have your link. They're going to keep coming on as different names.
Yeah. Okay. I did that a little earlier. I just did it again. Yeah. Okay. So go ahead, Chief, and let us know about particularly whatever you want to share with us, but also the new enforcement officer who's specific to COVID. And I wanted to hear a little bit about your YouTube presentation so everyone knows that it exists. I've looked at it several times and I like it a lot. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that it's out there. So go ahead, Tina. Let me find a way to unmute you if that's the problem. Okay, I've unmuted you on my end, Tina, and you might be muted on your end.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Are kids logging in using foul language?
Yeah, to the City Hall Zoom meeting.
So Tina, I'm sorry I had to mute you along with everybody else. So we can't hear what you're saying, but I'm going to unmute you now.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now? You should be able to.
We can. Yes, we can.
So I shared my screen. Can you see that?
Not yet. I can, well, maybe others can. Let me see if I can reduce. No, we can't see your screen.
Okay, even though I'm shared it. Okay, well, let me, anyway, so we hired a COVID enforcement officer. Actually, that person is out of planning and they work for Fred. But if you go to the city website that Eric had up earlier, where the buttons were, if you look to the left-hand side, it says COVID enforcement. And if you click on it, it takes you to an email. So you can email the COVID enforcement officer. So they can follow up on any complaints that the police are not necessary to be there right there and now. You still can call the non-emergency line though, if you need the police, sooner than later. And for the non-emergency line, the number is 831-384-7575. If it's an emergency, always call 911. Just to give you a quick history on who that COVID enforcement person is. They retired with over 28 years of law enforcement. Over 20 of that as a detective and a sergeant with a different agency. They're honorably retired. They have over 20 years as a licensed PI and currently licensed as a private investigator. And they're also an experienced construction manager and have done several projects in the state of California. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, and it kind of happened overnight. That person primarily handles the business complaint side of the house. If there's a complaint about a business operating, and then their secondary job is to conduct business checks per the stay-at-home order. The cops, we go out there when we can to do the business checks, but that's one of their jobs, to actually go down and talk with the business owners to make sure that everything's filled out correctly and it's posted correctly. This person also liaisons with the police department on a daily basis, so we don't have a duplication of effort, including putting FI or field interview information in, and they're tracking. So we're now tracking it in two ways, because that's what the city asked us to do. On the police department side, we created what we call a hazard code, so I could run the hazard code and see how many times we've gone out on like COVID type things. And for the police, in the last couple of weeks, there's been 10 field interviews that have been inputted into the system that were COVID related from complaints. We've made a couple arrests, but it's usually we make an arrest for something else, and then we add an additional charge that they're violating the stay-at-home order. So if you're out robbing or selling drugs and we catch you, we're going to add that stay at the shelter-in-place charge to what you're getting arrested for. On the planning side, all these business checks are being tracked in what we call Citizen Serve. It's the program that planning uses for any code enforcement and projects. And so that's also being tracked. So we can track it in a couple different ways to help, our community be more compliant and make sure we're talking to the right people, and that none of the complaints are ignored. So that's what's going on with that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I heard the governor's conference today, and he said that being punitive, this is not the time to be punitive, that the huge focus is still on education. And he made the example that if someone just lost their job and they're hurting and they do something that's not compliant, but they're not being evil about it, they're just not aware, or they're just not doing the right thing at that moment, the last thing they want to do is cite them with some kind of a ticket or an enforcement action that's going to make their life worse when they're already struggling. And I think let me ask you, is that sort of the approach that you're taking as well? Education first and enforcement only when necessary?
Yeah, and it's been it was the approach I've always taken, even before we had the code enforcement officer. Actually, we only brought on the code enforcement officer because of about 2 meetings ago at City Council, to be perfectly honest. City Council was not happy that we weren't out there just citing people. And I'm not saying you, Mr. Mayor, but that was kind of what the flavor of the City Council was. And so we brought on this person, and we're still not out there just citing people, because this is not the time to just be citing people. People are hurting. And it's new and it's fluid, and we're learning every day. So we're still taking the tack that we want to educate you. So we're still going out and warning people. But we're documenting that you're being warned. And so if we have to go out there again or second time, then we're going to cite you the second time. But the first time, we're always going to warn you. And we're going to provide that education to educate you about the stay-at-home order. All my cops have been, educated on it. They've all received training. They have their responsibilities, the supervisor's responsibilities. We did special directive just for enforcement of this. And but our main thing is education, education, education. And if you don't give us any choice, then we're going to cite you, or we could arrest you.
All right. Thank you. And Mike Kennedy, I accidentally removed you thinking you were a heckler. And so I have emailed you an invite to come back in. And I wanted to mention that I think it was Wendy, because it says from W. That's probably Wendy wanting to let us know that there's additional resources available at C, like the letter C, the number 4, and then yourself.com. So C4yourself.com is an online application to apply for CalFresh nutrition assistance, Medi-Cal, or cash assistance if your income has been reduced. And the Economic Development Department of the state of California unemployment insurance has been expanded to cover a lot more workers, including those who have reduced hours, not just those that have lost their job. And the applications for that unemployment insurance can be submitted online at www.edd.cad.gov. Anyway, that link is in the chat box. And I'm going to turn it over to Wendy to say a little bit more about that. I know it's kind of backtracking from what Tina was just saying, but go ahead, Wendy, if we can get you in here.
Hi, can you hear me? Let me move to a different part of the house. It's a little quieter.
Sure. Yes, we can hear you.
Bear with me. Okay, here we go. Hi, Bruce. Hi, Marina.
Hello, Wendy. Thank you for joining us. And I think you've joined us every week, so we appreciate that.
What can I share with you today? What would be helpful?
Well, was that your chat message that there's additional help from?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, I know that as we look at the lines of people every Friday, every Tuesday, I think Marina has 5 different food distribution sites, days with food distribution happening. And I just want to make sure that everybody in our community knows that we do have county administering the public assistance programs, and those remain an option for people. If you've had income that's been reduced and you suddenly fall into the income qualifications, CalFresh can provide you with EBT cards that help you purchase food. I know for so many people, it's just not something that they've ever had to think about or consider applying for. But these resources are here, and we want everyone in our community to be secure in having enough food to eat. If you have lost your health insurance as a result of a loss of employment, Medi-Cal is available. The application is online. It's easy to just pop on, see how close you might be to qualifying, and then a county eligibility worker will follow up with you to get the additional information that they need. But it's just one more resource that we want to make sure people are aware of.
And thank you, Wendy. For anyone who doesn't need that help themselves, but you may know of someone else that you think may need that help, please encourage them to contact Wendy through the county or contact our city hall, and our city hall will refer them. And Wendy, if people just call 211, is that a place they can get some of this information?
Yeah, absolutely. 211 continues to field just a wide range of questions. United Way actually brought in additional people to answer the 211 calls at the call center because we were receiving so many more calls than in a typical day or month. Again, those calls tend to be mostly related to housing and food access, but the 211 operators have a ton of information available and can help put you in touch with the right answers and refer you to the right places to get information. But the ability to apply for public assistance is really simple. The C4yourself.com website, it's confidential, it's private. You don't have to call me. You don't have to call, no one has to know that you're applying, but you can go on, you can check out, see if you're eligible. And if you are, a county eligibility worker will follow up and you'll be able to get some additional help.
Great. I have a close relative getting help for the first time, and she's getting something like Meals on Wheels, but it's not Meals on Wheels, and she gets a week's worth of lunch once a week. She told me last night, She's 90 years old. She told me last night, yeah, they give me lots of chicken, but it's so tough. I don't eat it. So I give it to my dog, Gigi. But everything else I really like. And I just thought that was hilarious. She gets her chicken to her dog.
Yeah. One of the other things, Bruce, I'll just mention is that, our food bank is probably one of the most significantly impacted local nonprofit organizations that's meeting essential community needs. We went from our food bank providing, food as needed to, as of last month, we're estimating that the food bank has provided over 55% of our residents in the county with nutrition assistance. And their food purchase budget has skyrocketed, just higher than anyone could have ever anticipated. The County of Monterey has so far committed $500,000 to support the purchase of bulk staple food products, but the food bank is estimating that they need an additional, above and beyond what they already have resources for, they need an additional $3 million over the next 6 months to keep up with the increased demand for food. So the county submitted a letter to the governor asking for additional state funding to ensure that our food banks have the capacity to purchase what they need. And I'm also just encouraging anyone who has the personal capacity right now to contribute to the food bank to make sure that we can continue getting staple nutritional items back out into the community for those who need it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Wendy. And that was a little bit of a sidetrack, and I'm glad that we took it from what our chief of police was saying. Tina, were you done, or did you have more information for us before we turn it over to the public to ask you any questions or thoughts they have on your information?
No, I put in the chat room the email for the COVID enforcement officer. It's covidenforcement@citymarina.org. And then I also put the hyperlink to the YouTube presentation for the full PowerPoint to talk about everything that the PD and what we're doing. And it's much too long for this meeting. So if you go to either that hyperlink or go to the Marina PD's Facebook, there's a hyperlink there and you can click on it and then watch the entire presentation. If you get bored with that one, then you can also click on the mayor's first message when this all started. So.
Well, you won't get bored by Tina's presentation. It's pretty good. Thank you, Tina, for making that available, because it was something you worked hard to prepare, and we didn't have time during the city council meeting last Tuesday to see it. So that's our only way of learning what it's talking about. And then we got from I'm not sure who R is there any idea when the parking lot at Marina Beach will be open? And that's a state park question. And the concern is that handicapped and elderly aren't able to just go to the parking lot anymore and sit. So they're a little bit, they're not as able to enjoy the beach as people that can walk from wherever they do park. And so it's not our gig. It's a state thing, authorization. But Tina, do you have any inside knowledge on what State Parks is thinking?
Yeah, and it's not to stop anybody from the beach. What was happening is that the parking lots were getting overpacked. There was no distancing with the cars all packed into the lots. And they didn't want to encourage people to come to our beach just because it was open. They want people to use the beaches, but they don't want, outer towners just rushing the beaches. I don't know if you guys saw in Orange County this past weekend down in Southern California. It was a really hot weekend. And their beaches got overrun in Orange County because they were open and the LA beaches were closed. But Rob, I can tell you that what I'll do is that I talked to the state rep. I can ship him an email because there was another question that you had that I'll get answered. And we'll see if they're even looking at that.
Okay. And we've had a couple of questions come in. One from Mike, who I accidentally removed from the meeting, and I hope he can get back in, but he wants to know if you have anything you want to tell us about the gunshots that were recently heard. And what I think he's talking about is a couple of days ago, there were some heard in the vicinity of California Avenue and Rain Dollar.
Right. And you had emailed me about that. So we did have some gunshots that were related to a crime where someone got shot. What I can tell the public about, it's under investigation, but what I can tell the public is that the public isn't in danger. And the person that, nobody should get shot. But, there's reasons, like, I guess. I can't explain anymore. I did look at the California rain dollar shots fired, and there might have been shots fired. I've reached out to communications, but nobody made a police report. And so I ran for the whole month, and because in next door people were going crazy. That every night there's shots being fired, and if there is, I'm not saying there's not. Nobody's telling us, or no reports are being made, because I ran the area to see if there were any reports of shots being fired in the city limits, and there was nothing, and just shots fired in the area. But I am waiting back from communications to see if anybody called in and said, well, I don't want the police to go, but I just wanted to report it. So I don't have those numbers yet. What I can tell people is that on Nextdoor, the mayor sometimes lets me know stuff, but I don't answer back when it comes to Nextdoor. If you want to get a hold of me, you can email me directly, or you can pose a question on Facebook. It's too much, and people go, why don't you go into Nextdoor? But just to let you know, we're a small police department, and we don't have enough time to be monitoring every piece of social media that's out there. So what we choose to use is Facebook or a direct email.
And you also have a direct non-emergency line. This would be an emergency. If you hear gunshots, I would advise everyone immediately call 911. You can't get much worse than gunshots. But there's also a non-emergency line for anything else that's your urgent thinking about that's not an emergency at 384-7575. So there's various ways to get directly to the police department that are better than social media, especially not on the police Facebook page. But I wouldn't go to the police Facebook page to report gunshots. I'd go to 911. And Tina, anything else that you want to add about that?
So if somebody has, because, I heard I have recordings of it or whatever, you can send it to us and we'll take a look at it. What I can tell you is that, yes, we do have fireworks set off in the area. And other people have responded that way to let them know. And sometimes, cars backfire and you actually can hear it from the freeway depending on the night, and it could sound like a gunshot. But if you have it, send it to us. We'll take a listen. And the other thing is that somebody brought up, why don't you buy a shot spotter like they have in Salinas? The shot spotters are hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy one shot spotter, because I worked with it in LA, so I know this. And we're not a community that needs a shot spotter to spend our money. That would not be a wise way for us to spend our money. It's wiser to put it into the business and residential loans, because we don't have a violent crime problem in the city of Marina. It happens occasionally. I'm not saying there's not a problem, but it's not, from a police standpoint, we're a property crime type of community.
All right. A couple of questions about the stay in place or shelter at home current order. The first one is it going to be extended? And it's a county decision, and they follow the state lead, I think, to some extent. So is it planned to be extended? Do you have any information on that? And number two, is there any chance that landscaping professionals are going to be allowed to get back to work if there's any kind of relaxation of the stay in place orders? So Tina or Lane, you want to talk about professional landscaping?
Bruce, I'm still here. So the police chiefs, meet once a week via Zoom, and the county, for the bigger county meeting, meets twice a week. And we just had actually the county Zoom meeting today. And the question is, we don't know what Dr. Marina is doing. All the chiefs and everybody's asking, what's county health doing? Because we're hearing the same rumors. And so at this point, we don't know. I know it's not an answer you guys want to hear, but we don't know. But I can tell you, we're bringing these issues up with county health, with Dr. Moreno, about, the landscape issues at every meeting. We're talking to him. We've heard rumors that everybody's going to go to a mask. Is that true? When is that going to happen? And it's going to get extended. But right now we haven't got an answer back. And county said they're going to, he wasn't on the line today, so they're going to get with him and try to get an answer back to everybody.
Okay. Wendy, from the county's perspective, do you have anything to add about professional landscaping or extension of the shelter in place orders?
Yeah, so the health officer has not issued an extended order, but he did indicate at his media briefing yesterday that there will be an extension to the order coming out. So we can expect that that will occur at some point this week. He's also indicated that it's likely that a mask or a facial covering order will be coming out sometime soon. So we're watching and waiting for that order. There was a follow-up question that you had, about professional landscapers. So the way that it's been described to us by our health officer is that the state is looking to move from defining businesses as being essential or non-essential, and instead looking at a risk assessment model to determine which businesses can begin to resume operations. So a business that is able to operate while maintaining social distance from beginning to the end of the transaction. So if it's a landscaper who's operating by themselves and they can get to the job site and perform their function and return back home while maintaining social distance, that would be considered a lower risk type of job function and would be more likely to be opened up sooner. So that's what we're hearing from the county health officer from the state. And we do expect there to be an extension to the current shelter-in-place order with some changes. We don't know what those will be. And we also expect that there will be a facial coverings order coming out soon.
Okay, so facial covering, mask or bandana or something to cover your face. Lane Long, is it normal in these kinds of cases for cities to wait for counties to provide some leadership? I can't hear you, Lane. Maybe others can. Lane, I don't think we can hear you, but we're going to try to. You're muted on your end, I believe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I think on issues that directly deal with health like that, we take the lead from the county health officer, especially when it's things that really impact your whole neighboring community and county. If one city is doing one thing, another city is doing something else, another city is doing something else, it really does not have the full impact and the coordination that you need on something like this. And so I think typically we look to the county health officer, and as Wendy Askew mentioned, we are having regular discussions with them. He is fully aware of all the issues. He's fully aware of the impacts on the small businesses, on the construction industry, on the landscaping industry. But ultimately, he's looking at the safety of human lives. And that is what is driving a lot of the decisions. And so if he puts an order in to wear masks out in public, it's because he believes that that will save human lives and stop the spread of COVID-19. If he extends the order again for a little while, I think he's looking to the leadership of the state at that point, just kind of as we're looking to the leadership of the county in certain areas, our county's looking to the leadership of the state in certain areas. And I think he's looking to the state on possibly extending the order. And again, if he does that, he's doing that because he believes that is not only the best way to stop the spread of COVID-19, but also the best way to save and protect lives.
Yeah, Lane and I, we were talking, I think yesterday, about what it would be like to be the county health officer, and you go to bed at night and knowing that your decisions can cause higher fatalities or your decisions can lead to economic stress. I mean, that is a lot of pressure on somebody, and we offer our best wishes to Ed Moreno to get through this like everybody else, but he's in a unique position with a lot of stress. Whatever decision he makes could affect a lot of people for good or for worse. And Audra's asking, looking ahead, if there were a face covering order, where is it likely that we would need to wear the masks? Wendy, do you have any insight?
Yeah, the best insight that I can offer is that, there have been mask orders issued in other counties. So in most of those situations, the masks are required or recommended when you're outside, unless you're exercising. So if you're on a run, if you're riding a bike, if you're doing solo driving in your car, there's no mask requirement or facial covering requirement at that point. But for grocery stores, for crowded, or pathways where you may not be able to continuously maintain your 6 foot of distance from other people, the mask or facial covering recommendation would be in place. So
Okay.
I would look
Bruce, if it's consistent with what's already going out there as far as facial coverings, they will exempt children of a certain age because they don't want them choking on it. And even those, and it's not just running, they will exempt people that are exercising. However, once they start exercising, you need to have that mask to cover, going to and from. So it would be anytime that you're out in public and not in your own private area, you'd be required to wear the face mask.
I wonder if you were walking down a sidewalk downtown by yourself, if you'd have to. Now, if you're passing somebody, I think maybe that would be more important. But if you're all by yourself on a sidewalk somewhere,
you would be required to wear it if we go to face coverings.
Okay. And Wendy, thank you very much, Chief. Wendy, did you have anything else that you wanted to say? Okay. We had a question. Are neighbors allowed to meet in parks? If so, is it okay to bring chairs with social distancing? And if so, up to how many people? Tina, this is a great multi-question opportunity for you.
So are neighbors allowed to meet?
In parks.
In parks. You have to maintain your social distancing as a family unit. So if you
these are neighbors. Are neighbors allowed to meet? Yeah,
but what I'm saying is that what I would say, it's not wise to do so, because you could meet and say, I'm 6 feet away from that family unit. That's true, but it's just going to take somebody going over to mingle. That now, you're violating the stay-at-home order. So it's ill-advised to do that. There's best practices and then there's rules. The rule is you have to maintain the 6 foot distance. So, and the park really, my cops will probably be out there and I'm going to get a complaint if you set up your chairs and do something like that. It's not a place just to lounge. It's our parks are open so people can get out and get some fresh air and do some walking and not be cooped up in their homes. And not have the picnic right now. So we would ask people to refrain from that.
Okay, and an extension on a question that extends on where you'd have to wear the mask. If your front yard was close to a public sidewalk and you were in your front yard, let's say you were pulling weeds or just sitting there, would you need to wear a mask in your front yard if you were close to a public sidewalk?
No, because when you're on private property, you're not technically in public property. It's when you look at some of the rules, it's on public property, not just in the public. It'll say stuff like when you're in stores, out, on public property, shared spaces.
Okay.
In the privacy of your home, when you're in your yard, no, you don't need to wear it. I would have it handy though. What if you step out on the sidewalk? I'm just saying, because we're going to get the calls. But I get it. Some yards are small, so you can't avoid it. But there are people out there though that will wear their mask. When I'm outside, I wear my mask all the time.
All right. Now, just to be clear, private property might include grocery outlet or Lucky. So there is some private property where you're encouraged to wear your mask and you may be required to wear a mask. But the private property of your own home,
right? It would be private property, not accessible to the public. In other words, your front yard, people can't legally just go into your front yard because it's not accessible to the public by the law. Places like Lecky and stuff, even though they're privately owned, they're accessible to the public. There is a difference in the law.
All right, and it was out of concern, I think, that Audra was asking, can you get sick from being in your yard without a face mask and folks are walking around on a nearby sidewalk?
Can you get sick?
That's
yes,
the question.
The possibility is there. The 6 foot is just because the average sneeze can travel 6 foot, and they're learning more about this COVID disease. So every day we're learning more stuff. Like it lists 3 days on cardboard. So if you get Amazon boxes, you might want to open them outside and then bring the stuff in, or Chewy or whatever you get. You know, there was a study that somebody did that they said that a really big sneeze can travel 28 feet. So, you know, you just got to be careful, but 6 feet is the general rule for regular coughing or sneezing.
Okay. Are homeowners association community properties considered private property? Let's say a park at the dunes or a park at Sea Haven, these different homeowner association areas.
Yes, they are, because they're accessible to the public, because they're not fenced in. So if it was fenced in, then we'd have to look at it like on a case-by-case basis. But even in the dunes and these other places, it is accessible to the public, just like Lucky's. Anybody can go there. That makes it accessible to the public.
Okay, so if there's a barbecue area that's a community available area at the University Village Apartments, then there are these guidelines or requirements that apply to that private property.
Yes, there normally is. I can't answer specifically, but yes, there normally is.
So someone mentioned, wow, you sneeze in 28 feet if you're a strong sneezer. So that's a surprise to some that it could travel that far. Most, if not all of these questions, someone says, can be answered by going to the county frequently asked questions. And Wendy should have the web address, they say, and a phone number if they need more information. So Wendy, can you educate us about these frequently asked questions? And maybe it's on our city website too, because Matt Mogensen has been working really hard to make sure all the county information is also with us at our city website. So Wendy, as soon as you...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt. Or Lane, sorry.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. Go to the county website, go to the city's website for facts and information, because the information that we connect to is directly from the CDC or other scientific reputable sources. There's a lot of you know, statements and things going out there on social media and various reports, but don't necessarily rely on those. And so our links are to the scientific data, the proven things of CDC, and that's where we would really encourage people. If you have questions and want what has been proven, go to those sites.
And Wendy has offered a lot of those sites in the chat box, which are web links, which I'm not going to read because you know what that's like, reading web links. But thank you. And she mentions again, you can call 211. And Paula mentions in the chat box, County of Monterey website for FAQs. You can also go to. Thank you, Paula and Wendy.
And Lane's right, because I said 28 feet for the powerful sneeze. It's actually 27 feet. So I was a foot off on the MIT study. So
yeah, well, I'm going to stay at least 28 feet away just to be safe. Of course, you got to know when they're going to sneeze, right? Because once they've done it, it's too late to get that extra foot in. Okay. Any other police-related, enforcement-related, COVID questions? I don't see any hands going up. Thank you very much, Tina. I know every day is a long day for you and your staff on the police department because they're doing their normal stuff, and they've got all kinds of extra precautions they've got to take to protect themselves, and they have a different kind of calls coming in because of this COVID crisis. So the police are out there every day dealing with everything that's changing so frequently, and we hope that they stay safe and are able to keep protecting us at the same time. That's the best of both worlds. So thank you, Tina, and to your whole department. And thank you to Eric and Matt, if I didn't say thank you earlier, for helping us out understanding better the business and residential loan programs and where we can go to get more information so that people that need the help, hopefully, if they qualify, they can get that. Our next item before we turn it over to any general questions anyone might have or specific is about our alternative care site that a lot of you have heard about at the Marina Airport. And Wendy has been good about asking if there's any questions the city has, and we get some answers back. And one question we had was, if the alternative care site starts having COVID patients at our Marina Airport, what can we as residents or staff do to help? And the answer back was to contact the volunteer unit of the Emergency Operations Center. So if you want to get them meals somehow, or you want to get them gift cards somehow, or you want to give them a thank you card, which I don't know if they would want that because of, they don't want to touch something that came from the public. But anyway, if you have an idea to help, if that becomes operational after May 3rd, Wendy, can you tell us anything about the volunteer unit at the EOC?
Yeah, I was just looking up the information now, but they did just put a call out for volunteers who can assist with the alternate housing sites. So the alternate care site is the one in Marina that's essentially going to be sort of an extension of our local hospitals that'll be staffed with medical professionals, healthcare professionals. We're, fingers crossed, if we continue to shelter in place and practice social distancing, we will not need this Marina alternate care site, because we will not exceed capacity of our local hospitals. That really is part of the goal of the shelter in place, was to allow us to increase our capacity so that we can handle, additional people who are sick. But the volunteer unit is looking for volunteers who can help staff the alternate housing sites. The alternate housing sites, there's 3 of them in the works. One at the Monterey Fairgrounds, and that would be a location where people who are positive, who test positive for COVID, but don't have a home that they can return to where they can quarantine themselves. So maybe it's a family that has, 3 families living in a home together, and one of the individuals tests positive, and it's not possible for them to go back to their home and have their own private space. The fairgrounds would become a site where that person can go and have a sort of a safe place to quarantine, where they're provided with a cot and a private little area and, meals and healthcare if they need it. This is not someone who would need to be hospitalized. So that alternate housing site will become operational. We're expecting it to go into operation on this coming Friday. So 2 additional sites will be operational in the coming weeks, one in Salinas and one in South County. So the County Emergency Services is looking for volunteers who are able and willing to commit to volunteering at that alternate housing site on an ongoing basis. There would be training and protective gear, because you would be at a location caring for the housing and care of folks who have tested positively for COVID. So if you're interested in doing that, I will post a link on the chat site. But again, it's so long as we can continue as long as we can flatten this curve and keep our hospitals from being overwhelmed with cases that all come in at the same time. In a best case scenario, we don't need the Joby site, the Marina alternate care site, to be operational, but we are planning for worst case scenarios to make sure that everyone has care if that does become the situation.
Thank you, Wendy. And so far, I was told today there's not been any lodging provisions arranged yet for potential staff that may work out of that field hospital. And so maybe we can follow up with Lane and Wendy offline to start trying to get some local hotels to be available, and maybe people can donate a night's lodging in case we have long commuters working at that field hospital in Marina. And if they have trouble getting between shifts and getting enough rest, maybe we can help out by getting them hotel rooms. And we were told today that no visitors will be allowed because all the patients inside that field hospital would be COVID positive, so similar to hospitals. And the cost is unknown for this field hospital, but it's expected to be large, a significant cost. And the activation of whether or not this actually is used as an alternative field hospital is dependent on the level of capacity that our other 4 hospitals have. And if those hospitals do reach their capacity later than expected, then the ACS would not be needed until later than expected, or it maybe not be needed at all. And any donations from the Marina residents will be gladly accepted. And I think we'd have to funnel those through the information given to us by the volunteer unit at the Emergency Operations Center. All hospitals can send their patients to the Marina Field Hospital after any one of the 4 hospitals have reached their surge capacity. So it's not just CHOMP overflow, it's any hospital overflow in Monterey County. I think it's just Monterey County. Wendy, would that be possible for out of county, or is it a county by county arrangement?
I mean, I hesitate to speak on that. I think that everything that we're doing right now is, we're making plans, and I can't imagine a scenario whereas if we had extra capacity and the counties around us were suffering, we would, hoard our capacity. But I don't think at this point that we're intending for this to be beyond what Monterey County would utilize.
Okay. And then I think I was asked maybe by Audra about, how these patients are going to get to our field hospital, if our field hospital, our alternative care site at the Marina Airport is activated. And the answer I got back was that the routes used by the ambulances transporting patients to the field hospital Marina would be using the common routing. So probably Highway 1 to Imgen, from Salinas, it'd be Highway 101, from South County to eventually get to Blanco, or from Salinas. So the common, most obvious, quickest ways would be those that would be used, but there would not be any sirens interrupting our daily life for that kind of transport, because it wouldn't be an emergency situation. These would be people that are stabilized or recovering. Those who are not experiencing an emergency at the moment would be transported in ambulances, and so there would be no sirens, going through Imgen Parkway. And then I asked a couple other questions about, are there any risks to Marina residents? And the answer back is that the patients being transported to the alternative care site Marina, if it does get activated, would not cause any risk for our residents, nor would any of the patients or staff using the field hospital while they're there, would there be any expectation, there'd be any risk to Marina residents from the operations of that facility. And I was told that there doesn't need to be a licensing process for the 4 hospitals in Monterey County to increase the number of beds they already have, that state law or state waivers have been provided, so that the hospitals will be looking to increase the number of beds they have in an expedited way without having to get the normal approvals to do that. And so I think that the available bed number is going to increase in Monterey County, making it even less likely for the overflow to be sent our way. But that's completely within the county's hands and each hospital's hands, whether or not they have enough increase in their licensed number of beds to have an overflow come to Marina, or prevent that overflow from coming to Marina. And Wendy, I'm kind of uneducated in this, so if I misspoke at all, can you jump in and add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just so currently we have 678 licensed beds in the county between our 4 hospitals. Those hospitals have identified additional beds that aren't necessarily licensed, but that we could utilize within the hospital existing capacity. And they could get us from 678 up to 954 beds with a surge capacity inside our existing hospital system. So it really wouldn't be that we need an alternate care site until the situation where we surge beyond that surge potential of 954 beds.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. That's really great. That's new information for me. I appreciate that 954 number. I hadn't heard that. And Wendy, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do want to ask if you have any information on my next question. And that is that there has been some information provided to the Board of Supervisors about a potential for up to 33,000 countywide COVID cases. And right now we have about 164, but those are only the known cases. So is it true that if we have 164 known cases, we really don't know if even we have thousands of unknown cases, but is it true that the unknown cases could sort of dwarf in number the known cases of 164?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an epidemiologist, so I will just sort of regurgitate what I've been told. But, and we know that not everyone who has symptoms has been tested, right? So we know that there are people who have mild symptoms who haven't received testing. The testing that we do have, the county's capacity is only 80 tests per day. Even with these additional testing resources that we'll be getting from the state, that brings us up to an additional 130 tests per day per additional test site. Some of our hospitals are doing their own tests. I think CHOMP can do 10 per day. SVMH can do a certain number on site per day as well. So we know that there are many people beyond those who have tested positive who are likely to also be carrying the virus. A number of, in the testing numbers, you can see it's broken out. I don't have them in front of me, but there's, community contagion. So people who've tested positive who can't identify who it was that they were around who was COVID positive. So one of the things that they do when you test positive, the health department will do contact tracing. They'll come back to you and they'll say, were you exposed to COVID? Do you know who you got this from? And a lot of times they can trace the disease back through the relationships. But we're finding an increasing number of people who test positive who can't identify where they got it from. And so those are the situations that indicate to us that there are more people in the community who are carrying this who don't know that they have it. We don't have any immunity as a general population to this virus, and so those of us who are sheltering in place, we're protecting ourselves from getting it, but we're also remaining in a situation where we're all very vulnerable to being exposed and to getting to contracting it. So Dr. Moreno has been very clear that your risk of exposure is anytime you go out and go to the store, you risk being exposed to this virus. And if you're a carrier and don't know it, you risk exposing others. So the shelter in place has allowed us time to build out our capacity for the alternate housing sites, to build out our capacity for a potential surge with an alternate care site. It's given our county time to build out testing capacity. We're bringing in additional epidemiology folks who can help do the contact tracing. These are all things we didn't have in place 3 weeks ago. And we now have additional capacity to be able to respond, because once we reduce the restrictions and start letting people out again, the virus will continue to spread in our community. And so we need to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep those who are most at risk and vulnerable populations safe, and be prepared for the illness that will inevitably come.
Okay, so don't be like me and compare the 184 or the 164 confirmed cases to 33,000 and say, we're nowhere near 33,000. So, let's relax a little bit, because we're not going to get to 33,000. The point is that I want to make tonight is, if there's 184 or 164 confirmed cases today, that is far less than 33,000. But we could be up to thousands of cases that are not yet known, because their testing is so minimal in number, the way that Wendy explained it. So it's not a time to relax, because we don't have very many cases compared to 33,000. And for a while, I was thinking that we're never going to get to 33,000 if we're only adding 5 or 10 or less per day. But those are the known cases, very different than the actual number of cases that are out there, because probably more cases are unknown, probably many more than those that are known. And on the county website today, it was reported 164 total cases. And I think it's Paula that points out, per a Johns Hopkins University report, Monterey County has 184 cases, still with the same 4 number of fatalities that I spoke about earlier in our town hall tonight. And you can get those numbers on the county website's daily situation report. Okay, I'm going to check and see.
Yeah, and I'll just add, Bruce, I don't think we're never going to count everyone who's positive, right? Even in places like New York and we're not doing random street testing of people. We're never going to count all of the actual cases. We're only going to be looking for, so that 33,000 number was never an estimate of the number of people who would be tested positive. So those are 2 very different numbers that we're looking at. And I'll also just add that it's been very clearly stated that the models that we have are fully imperfect, and they're the best that we have for purposes of planning for worst case scenarios, to make sure that our community is cared for with quality healthcare and with keeping vulnerable populations safe. So we're using those models for planning purposes, but we understand that those models don't necessarily represent the reality that we're dealing with.
Okay. All right. There's more I'd like to ask Wendy, but I'm respecting everyone's time. And this has been a really good meeting. We're already about 30 minutes beyond what I thought the hour would take, but I think it's been great information. And I invite everybody to stay on the line. But before we adjourn officially, and I'll stay on the line unofficially to talk about speed limits and talk about what City Council did, their actions last week. But before we end officially our town hall meeting, I wanted to give one more chance to everybody on the line to ask any question or make any comment relevant to what's going on in the city at this time. So I'm looking for hands to go up via Zoom or hands to go up in your video. Dushan, I've never seen you so quiet, but that's okay. All right. Well, I think that we've exhausted the questions and comments that we've had on the material. Deborah, were you raising your hand? No. Okay. All right. So let's say that this is officially ending our town hall and say thank you to all of our special guests. It's been wonderful having the expertise collectively that you bring and individually each of you brought to us tonight, and most of you helped us out each night. So thank you to everyone for joining us and being an expert special guest. So I'm going to stay on the line. Everyone else, don't feel free to either stay or go on with the rest of your evening. And I wanted to talk for just a few moments about the speed limits. Most important message is, if you know about the proposal assessing speed limits and potentially increasing speed limits on 13 of our city street segments, if you have any comments that you think those are not a good idea, or other streets that you want lowered, or whatever ideas you have, the more specific you can be in your justification for your ideas. And whatever your ideas, get them in by tomorrow, close of business, Tuesday, April 22nd. April 28th, that's tomorrow, close of business. There's been a lot of comments sent in. I'm going to send in my comments segment by segment, what I think should happen, reduce or not reduce. But it all has to be justifications that are legal to use according to the traffic engineer. So do the best we can, all of us, to send our comments in tomorrow, whatever you have. And there's been extensive conversation about it on nextdoor.com. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, please give me a call at 277-7690, 277-7690, and I'll bring you up to speed the best I can. But the comments are due into the city to be provided in turn to the traffic engineer, so that in writing the traffic engineer will respond to all the substantive comments, so we can see all at once why certain actions are being proposed or certain speed limits are being proposed, even though we have comments coming in about those. So that's April 28th tomorrow. Get your comments in. And Brian, you're on the line. You've just joined us and you've had a lot to do researching, and I want to thank you for spending the time and doing the researching that you've done. And Peter Lay is not with us tonight, but Peter Lay is a former city engineer, and he kind of went above and beyond and brought up some points on nextdoor.com and sent them to all of our city council via email, so that those will be considered by the traffic engineer along with everyone else's, such as mine and everybody else who has submitted comments. So thank you to everyone who has submitted comments. And I wonder if anyone has any comments or questions about the speed limit issue they want to make tonight. Just raise your hand, except for Lisbeth. We don't need to hear from her on speed limits. Just kidding. She's been very vocal about speed limits. But Brian or anyone else, is there anything you want to say about what you know about the speed limits that are being proposed for increase or decrease or staying the same? But there's 43 different street segments that are in the 2020 traffic survey report. And we have until tomorrow to get the information, to get any thoughts we have into the traffic engineer. So Brian, if you wanted to say anything, or Elizabeth,
sure,
or anyone else, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I real quickly, I just want to thank you. for doing such a good job of explaining what the options are. It is a tricky issue, and one thing that I did aside from our local issues, I reached out to our state assemblyman and asked what his view was on changing the way the 85th percentile works. So if I hear back anything, I will certainly share that with you. But other than that, I don't have anything to add. I appreciate everything you've done on this issue.
Okay. I heard that you brought up, there's a Stanford report on other ways to enforce, but I haven't seen the Stanford report. If you know what I'm talking about, can you comment on that? Because maybe I'm just out to lunch and I didn't hear it correctly.
So it's actually a California state task force. It was commissioned about 1.5 years ago. The state assembly realized that this 85th percentile method of setting speeds may not be ideal. And so they commissioned a task force to look at other options that are out there. They did come up with a few. One that some other states are using, and I find personally really fascinating, is using computer machine learning to set speed limits. So instead of an engineer, a person making those decisions, you input data into a computer essentially and outspits a recommended speed limit. And so that program is actually available for the public to use. And I can put some links and the comments here in a second and show you where to get to that if anyone's interested in taking a look.
So pay attention to your chat box, everybody.
But hey, Mayor, this is Tina. Hey, Brian, they did look at that, but they didn't change the legislation. That's the problem. So even though they're looking at these alternatives, the alternatives aren't there for us to use at this time. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So, and I'm sorry if I'm going off path here, but I guess it's two different issues. One is let's look at the law and address the speed limits in Marina the best we can with existing legislation. And then secondly, if you find that existing legislation doesn't give you what you want, be sure to reach out to your state leaders to see if that can be changed on a state level.
And thank you, Brian and Tina. And I want to put in perspective in a thumbnail sketch way what we're talking about. We have 18 people on the line, but maybe not everybody is apprised of what's going on with speed limits in town. But there's a document that proposes increasing speed limits in 13 places and decreasing them in one place and keeping about 29 places the same that were assessed. And the way that this process works is the city hires a traffic engineer to study our streets, and he or she, in this case it's a he, they come up with an 85 percentile speed limit. So if you're on Crescent Avenue and he studies Crescent Avenue in person and he finds that 85% of the drivers are driving a certain speed, let's say it's 35 miles an hour, that would be 85% of the drivers that he observed were going at or below 85 miles an hour. He calls that the 85th percentile, 35 miles per hour. That's the starting point. Now, let's say that 85th percentile was 37. He rounds down or up to the nearest 5 miles per hour. So if he has an 85th percentile at 37 miles per hour, she or he would round that down to 35. And he would recommend that the speed limit be 35, whether it already is or it's lower than that. He would recommend 35. So that might be an increase. But if there's legal justifications that he has in his toolbox, he can pull those justifications out of his toolbox and say, okay, according to the 85th percentile and the rounding, it would be 35, but there's hills, there's not good line of sight, there's curves. The accident rate is 4 times that of the state average. And so for these reasons, I recommend shaving off 5 miles per hour after the 85th was established and the rounding brought it down to 35. So I recommend 30. So it's that kind of a process. And so with that process behind him, he recommended what to do about these 43 street segments that he studied. And council has read these proposals on a couple of occasions, and there's been a lot of controversy since the second time it came to city council. And so city council kind of maneuvered a little bit, not to say no and not to say yes, but to give everybody, including council members and the public, 2 weeks until April 28th to send in what they think are good justifications to lower or increase or keep the same the speed limits on any one of these 43 street segments that a person might be concerned about. So we've got a lot of comments about 3rd Avenue, Imgen Parkway, California Avenue, Crescent Avenue, Sunset Avenue, and there are probably some others that I'm forgetting. And so we're encouraging everyone to get those comments and those concerns as specifically as you can state them into the city at marina@cityofmarina.org. That's marina@cityofmarina.org before close of business tomorrow, April 28th. The engineer will get all those forwarded to him, and he will respond to all of those in writing so everyone can see in the near future why your justification was legally admissible to make a difference, or may have been a good suggestion, but he couldn't use it due to California law. So Tina, if you're still on, if I got anything wrong, please correct me because this is not my area of expertise.
I'm still here, Mayor, because obviously this interests me. The bottom line, folks, and I get everybody's concern, is that for me, I can tell you what's in it for me. I want my cops to be able to shoot LiDAR and radar on the streets, and we can't do it without a speed survey. But in the state of California, there's very specific laws on how you do speed surveys. And so you have to get these very, the reasons you have, they have to be a legal argument why the city engineer, or a good solid argument why he can do this. Now, like Brian did, you have to actually go in and look at the, it's in Mechanical Engineering of California that tells you exactly, it's something like that. I don't know exactly, it's something like that, that tells you the rules of when he can make changes and can't make changes. Can't be based on because I think that bush is too high, or I just think the traffic needs to slow down. Those are not legal arguments. So I encourage people to do your homework. If you really feel that the speed needs to be changed, then what's on that survey when you send it into the mayor or to the city.
And please do send it into the city. I love being CC'd and I love hearing your comments, but close of business tomorrow, get it into marina@cityofmarina.org. Is that right, Elizabeth? You're on mute, and maybe I need, but I mispronounced. Anyway, I made a mistake. And she corrected me.
Houston has his hand up in the screens.
Okay. I'm sorry. Who does? Dushan?
Yeah, Dushan's got his hand up.
Oh yeah, I see. I see it. Okay, Dushan, go ahead. I think you're unmuted, unless you're muted on your end.
Hi. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
This is a very important element that got just brought up, because this issue has been around for a while now, and people have been sending comments just like I did, without knowing that there needed to be some sort of a legal framework associated with that comment. Had that been known before, we could have probably phrased our comments much more appropriately. That I think should have been done. And maybe if we can push that for another week, but provide people with what what the requirements are for those comments, maybe that can help.
Thank you, Dushan. Tina, do you want to say anything about that legality?
Well, I didn't present the speed survey, but I think Brian did talk about where the legality, where the speed survey comes out of it. So I would just encourage people when they're listening to city council to listen to what's going on. I'm not a speed survey expert myself. I had to go out and do all the reading because of all the questions. So I just encourage people to keep educating themselves about it.
Yeah, the best we can do is tell people to go to the traffic survey and give them links in the traffic survey. It talks about those kinds of legal justifications that could make a difference. But they're somewhat intuitive. If there's not a good line of sight, if there's hills or curves, if it's unsafe for people to get out of their driveways, maybe that's considered. If there's a high accident rate, if you say that there's a high accident rate, I suppose that the traffic engineer would look in to confirm that or not, because if it's a really high accident rate, that is something that the traffic engineer has used to justify some of his speed limit proposals. But it's those kinds of things that are in the more usable format, rather than, I drive this road all the time and it's super unsafe, so don't raise the speed limit. Those kinds of comments are probably not going to be the kind of tools that the traffic engineer can actually use to justify his recommendations. But I'm sorry, Duchamp, that I didn't do a better job, because I had to be careful not understanding all the legalities, what I did say. So it was safe for me to say, get your comments in and try to be as specific as possible. But I didn't feel safe going too much further than that, because if I said the wrong thing, that could probably cause more problems. So from my perspective, it was better to be more general, refer them to the source, which is the report, and implore of them to get their comments in, no matter how sophisticated they may be or specific to the legal points that they would need to be. I'm hoping that the the traffic engineer and City Hall might be able to help with some of those comments. If they're not exactly on point, they could be turned into something. So it's good to get them in, whatever level of sophistication they may be. Someone says, don't hesitate to engage interested citizens on Facebook and Nextdoor for ideas on interpreting the speed surveys. I think they're saying that there's extensive discussion on Facebook and Nextdoor under these topics. And so you might be able to pick up some of those more specific, more sophisticated points of view others have. And someone, I'm sorry, probably Lisbeth, says that the Marina Police Department annual reports are online, and she wonders if there's somehow we can see or be privy to the number of speeding citations, because there's not in the report. It just talks about moving violations, which would include speeding. And so she's curious, is there a way that citizens can find out about city records as far as the number of speeding citations per year that have been issued?
Well, if I know what dates you're looking at, we can do a run and release that. The thing about it is that when you input stuff into it, it might be a couple streets, it's by intersection, so it might not be completely accurate. However, when they did the speed survey, they run that data, so they've already considered that data.
Good point. And if we don't want to overwhelm you with, hey, what about this street? What about that street? And send you to the computer all the time, you and staff, do you know if there's a stable percentage of citations that are related to speeding? Like, well, yeah, about 40% of our moving violations are speeding. Is there any kind of rule of thumb in Marina?
No, there isn't, unfortunately. Because I don't even have a stable percentage of them writing tickets, depending on what the complaints are. Because we respond to complaints or obvious places that are danger, if there's been an accident. So it really is kind of dictated by, the amount of officers working, complaints, and injury accidents.
Okay. Because we're in the more relaxed time, the official town hall is over, we can spend a little bit of time talking about Santina. I was looking at the 2018 annual police report, and it showed over a 5-year time frame back since 2014, I think, a steady decline in moving violations. It used to be over 3,500, and it was going down each year. And in 2018, it was below 1,500. It was like 1,350 or something like that. And my question to you was going to be offline, but here we are. Why do you think there's been such a reduction over the last 5 years in the amount of moving violations, vehicle moving violations, citations issued in the city of Marina?
Well, for one reason, because we haven't had a speed survey for a year and a half. So you're not writing radar tickets. I can't see that, Elizabeth. So those are gone down. The other reason is that we had an officer named Eddie Bachtel, who was a one-man wrecking ticket guy who probably wrote 2/3 of those tickets when he was employed by the city of Marina before he retired. That's all he did, though. And he'd write his grandmother a ticket. Now, that's not my philosophy. And I'm being serious about that. I'm not, we have to educate too. We just don't go out and hammer people. But that was kind of the philosophy that this person had, and he wrote most of those tickets, to be perfectly honest.
Okay. Elizabeth asks, if the public can't see the information, how can the traffic engineer use that data? So there must be a link between you and the traffic engineer to get him the data he needs for his survey report.
There's a lot of stuff for the traffic engineer that's not in the actual report because it's working data that you do on any analysis. That's just part of their working notes.
Okay. So is it true that the traffic engineer has access to drilling down the moving violations to speed violations and what streets they're on? So when he's looking at Crescent Avenue, he can go through the police department and find out how many accidents and how many speeding tickets even maybe were on Crescent Avenue?
Yes, he can. And Dushan threw up a question about why don't we use speed cameras. Dushan, it's not legal in the state of California. There's only a few cities that are doing a pilot program on speed cameras. And so we just don't have that tool yet. It's in other states, but not here in California.
And someone mentioned, people are getting ripped off when they get these tickets. And it's come up a lot. People think that maybe the city gives tickets because they make money. And I did a little bit of reading about this, and there's a base fee of about $35 that would go to the jurisdiction that issues the citation. But when you get in hundreds of dollars of a fine on a ticket, $35 of that, plus maybe a little bit more if it's your second violation or your third violation, but for the base fee. So you can imagine a policeman in Marina writes a ticket, a police officer, and the city would get $35. But the cost of the officer and the time of the officer to issue the ticket and wait to do the patrolling that they do, or if they're using radar, they're stationary waiting, and then writing up the report and going to court, you can imagine $35 is not going to go very far. So if we were trying to make money, we probably wouldn't do it by trying to rip people off, write them a citation, because it's going to help our city budget. But do you want to address that at all, Tina?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I sent you the breakdown. A lot of the monies that come from tickets are for a bunch of different fees that the city never sees. And it goes to all different kinds of people or different programs in the state, but not to the city of Marina.
Right.
Police work and public safety is not a money-making operation and never has been. In fact, the history of taxes, why people were taxed, were to pay for public safety before it started paying for everything else. Public safety is expensive, and you're never going to make your money if you decide that we're just going to hire a bunch of traffic officers and try to make our money. We don't make money. It's always going to be a losing proposition for what a police officer costs hourly just to stop and do that. So, and it would be illegal if we did do it. So we'd still lose money. It'd be a very bad business model for all you business people out there.
Right. Dushan mentions that speed cameras are also addressed in the task force report above. And Dushan, I'm sorry, I don't see the task force report cited above, unless it's the computer program that Brian mentioned called US Limits 2. It's a web-based program. Go ahead, Dushan.
Sorry, Bruce. I didn't say anything to that effect. Somebody else may have said something.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Brian. That was me. I had listed the report in a PDF link above, and so speed cameras are addressed in that report as well. It's just an interesting read if you're really interested in the dynamics of what the state is looking at in terms of legislation from a holistic approach.
Got you.
And just, for speed cameras, the state's been looking at that for at least 10 years. So the state moves very slowly. And it was just only about 3 years ago that some pilot cities were able to put it in.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Tina, and everybody talking about speed limits. Most important thing, learn what you will need to learn and get your comments in about a street you might be concerned about. It's funny, we have a father-son duo who live in a house on DeForest, and the father wrote in, raise the speed limit 5 miles per hour. It's the best thing to do. And the son wrote in, don't you dare reach the speed limit. It's too fast already. So there you have like a civil war going on with father and son giving us conflicting advice. It was kind of interesting. someone named starts with a name R, probably Rob or Rick. Other local agencies are giving a fine up to $1,000 for not abiding to the local city ordinances in place for social distancing. So now we're going to move from speed limits, which is fine. This is a very informal discussion right now. What's the fine within the city of, this is from Rob, what's the fine within the city of Marina for violating the social distancing ordinance?
So the fine is determined by the county health officer. And so I believe it's $500 to $1,000. So anything in the county, it's based on that. It's a health and safety code. So it doesn't matter if it's the city of Marina, the city of Seaside, or whoever. It all goes to the Monterey County DA, and the fine is, you know, whatever they dictate it. And it's because they call it a wobbler. And so that's why you see fines that shift the amount of money that people are being fined. And a wobbler is how you charge somebody on a case.
Okay, so thank you. So we're going to move from the controversial speed limit issue to something that may be as controversial, and that is the potentially removing the elected mayor position so that it would no longer be voted on by the people who's the mayor of the city of Marina. And somebody asked,
and Mr. Mayor, I'm going to leave now because I don't like to listen to the political stuff. It makes my ears burn, and I don't want to know.
Well, luckily, there's no politics in the police department. That's the place you want to go if there's no politics.
All right, folks. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you, team.
Wash your hands.
That's right. And so I think somebody asked what the status was, and Paula rightfully responded in the chat box. It wasn't gotten to, and there was no staff report. So perhaps the next meeting will have both the staff report and time to get to it. I want to add a little bit of insight there. The city manager told me before the meeting offline that it was pulled from the author of that who put it on the agenda wanted it pulled from the agenda. And it was my mistake during the meeting not to let people know, is anybody here for this item? Because we're going to pull it from the agenda, and we probably should have done whatever the appropriate procedure would have been to pull it from the agenda. We would not have gotten to it anyway, but even if we had time, it was being pulled from the agenda. My fault. I didn't go through the proper procedure to let everyone know it was being pulled. But basically, for those who don't know anything about this issue, or those that might know a little bit, we have recently been forced to carve the city of Marina up into 4 voting districts. And so instead of in the past, where you as a voter could vote for 5 elected officials, an at-large mayor who represents the whole city, and 4 at-large council members responsible for the whole city. You used to be able to vote for 5, but we were recently forced by an outside party that had legal reasons that we had to pay attention to carve the city up into 4 voting council member districts, so that starting now, we will not again be voting at large for 4 council members. So your voting power right now has been reduced essentially from voting for 5 people to voting for 2 people. Your district's city council woman or man, and the mayor. And some think that that is unfair because, for instance, I live in one of those 4 districts. So the district that I live in, which is District 2, would have 2 elected officials who live in my district. And some people think that gives double power or an imbalance of power, that my district, District 2, since it has 2 elected officials that residing in my district, that my district might get more advantage compared to the other 3 districts. And that's one reason that's been publicly stated, to change the elected mayor to no longer be elected, but carve instead the city into 5 council people's districts, no longer having a mayor be voted on as at large. And then the 5 city council people, in some fashion, they would appoint who the mayor would be and how long the mayor would be revolving. There's lots of ways of doing it. Brian McCarthy told me, you know, there's 50 ways if you look around the city. There's a lot of ways, maybe not 50. He was just using that. But there's a lot of ways you could not elect your mayor and do the districting differently than electing your mayor. So that's what that issue is about. And I don't know for sure if it's coming back to city council. And if it does, I don't know for sure if there'll be a staff report in the agenda packet. It was put on the agenda last week as a one of two-step process, first of two-step process. And the way our city council works is at that point, if a council member has an idea that they just want to put out there as a first step, then it's up to the council majority or the council to vote and say, we like that. You know, let's go down that trail, or we don't like that. That's kind of a rabbit trail. We don't want to go down that path and spend city staff resources and time on that. So, you know, thanks for the idea, but we're not interested. It would die at that first step. But if there was interest by at least 3 people, say, yeah, let's look into that. It's worth the staff time to look into that. Then staff would look into it and come back with some more meat on the bones for the city council to consider at the second step. So I'm not sure where this particular issue is going to go, but that's as much as I know about it. Does anyone want to comment what they know or what they want to know about that subject? And Audra, you asked, what were the legal reasons and how soon after the census will we be drawing the district? So this is a more of a complicated question, but the legal reasons were that we haven't had enough elected officials representing minorities compared to the number of minority residents in our town. And the assertion was it was sort of racial inequality. And for that, we needed to go to districts. But if you think about Marina, this is an outsider making that assertion, and he would also make up the $30,000 by making that assertion. So there are some people that go around the state making these assertions city by city, and legally they are being upheld by the courts. So the cities listen, and most of the cities do go to districts when they get this legal challenge. But if you look at the city of Marina, we don't have any one ethnic minority concentrated in one part of the city that never gets a representative. Our various minorities are spread throughout the city. And so it's very hard to say that one part of the city is not well represented on city council because that part of the city is of a certain ethnicity and they don't get someone who thinks like they do, who's of their culture, ever representing them on city council. So in my neighborhood, we have Japanese and African Americans and Germans and Filipinos and Vietnamese. And I think that's normal for the city of Marina to have their neighborhoods very well integrated between color and race, et cetera. So we don't think it was appropriate for Marina to be forced to go to districts, but the question was, what were the legal reasons? And that was my attempt to explain that. So we've already drawn up these 4 districts. And unfortunately, the people at the dunes didn't live in the dunes back in 2010, the last census. So the people living in the dunes or at Sea Haven out on Fort Ord, they weren't considered in this redistricting. So we know that when the 2020 census is all finished, we're going to have to redistrict all over again because of the lines on the boundaries between the districts will probably need to be changed because of the 10 years since 2010 where there's different numbers of people living in different areas. And so our district boundaries today that we just drew a few months ago will probably not make a lot of sense. And we knew that, but we had to rely on the 2010 census legally. Now we'll have the 2020 and we'll be redrawing those districts once we get the 2020 census, and staff has time to start working with us through that process of redrawing new districts. And whether there's going to be 4 or there's going to be 5, and whether there's going to be an elected mayor in the future or not, we'll see if the council brings that up and makes any changes. Paula, you have your hand up.
Yes. Can I speak?
Yes, we can hear you.
Couple of things. I just wanted to point out, I know you said you don't know whether it's coming back or not. And yes, we don't know whether it's coming back or not. But what people don't know, and I was kind of annoyed at some of what I was seeing on Nextdoor, is that The reason why the city council instituted this two-step process was because, for the very reasons that you stated, we don't know that the council is going to be interested in putting this on an agenda. And so the council some time ago implemented a policy where this two-step process came forward when the first step did not have a staff report. In other words, when it goes on the agenda to see whether or not the council wants to agendize it. And in that way, staff time was not wasted putting in a report on something. So even if it were to come back again as a first step, I don't think you're going to see a staff report there. And then second to that is the question about the legal, why were we picked out of the hat? And I think that's still an open question, because of all the cities, well, I don't know if all the cities on the peninsula, but certainly Marina is the most diverse and most spread through all of our areas throughout the city.